What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the second edition of TFM Live, the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com. I'm Brian Coyle, joined alongside with Sean Stanley. Sean, how are you doing on this fine, we're recording on this Wednesday evening. We'll be out on Thursday, but how you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm down here in beautiful Miami, Florida, so it's doing a great deal here.
Oh yeah, it's still nice up in New Jersey where I am right now. I mean, it's not the picturesque Miami Beach town, but a little bit for now.
Yeah, I'm in downtown Miami, so I got skyscrapers all around me, looking out at a beautiful, picturesque night.
Oh, nice. See, now, you don't want to make me feel bad about myself, 2 minutes into the podcast. So why don't we just move to another picturesque site? Let's go down to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, because an astounding card, not because of the actual card in totality itself, like UFC 189 was, but UFC 190 will be known as, possibly the night Ronda Rousey became even a bigger superstar. 34 seconds, round one, knocks out Bethe Correia cold. Just give me your immediate reaction to all this. I mean, now that we've had a couple days for it to sink in, how big was that moment for Ronda Rousey?
Oh, I mean, after everything that was said and how everything went down, I think it cemented everything that everybody's been saying about her, that she's the best at what she does.
I mean, I can't disagree with you there. Rousey came in immediately. I mean, that fight card kind of dragged a little bit because of the tough Brazil finales, and they didn't go on until 1:15, 1:30 for the main event.
Yeah, I think
luckily Shogun Rogério Nogueira woke people up a little bit because that was a great fight in and of itself. But when I saw Bethe Correia come out for the main event, and you looked in her eyes, and, a lot of people don't like Conor McGregor, but there's one thing that McGregor always says that I take great, to heart. If you look in someone's eyes and they're not ready to fight, they have no chance in the octagon. And you saw Correia try her hardest to be all amped up, but if you looked in her eyes, she was being fed to the lion. And that was, I was not surprised. The only thing I was surprised about is how Rousey just, let her get up to punch her some more instead of going for an easy submission. She had no shot, period.
Yeah, well, that's what she said. She said she was going to try to drag it out as long as she could, and she tried to. It just Correia would not go with it. And like you said, it was almost like watching the lamb led to the slaughter.
It truly was. Looking just the feeling, both of them coming in, like Correia's trying to, get herself together and amp herself up. And surprisingly enough, the crowd was on her side. Because Rousey did get booed, which I was really kind of surprised about. How everything was kind of trending towards her the entire week. But all of a sudden, it kind of seemed like the crowd turned, and you get the Uva Moher chants, and Correia comes out, tries to amp herself up, but is clearly nervous. It's a big fight for her. This could have been her moment. But then Rousey comes out, stone-faced, the glare in her eyes, immediately just pounces on her. And we got to see that knockout power of Rousey, which we haven't gotten to see in a little while, like that stuff that's been talked about. And she just went in there and took care of business. Easy.
Yeah, no, Brian, and I thought what was funny was that you see some people on, I don't know about on your Twitter feed or Facebook feed, but just your normal casual MMA fans, and some were like, oh, what, you can hit to the back of the head, and somebody even actually said it was an immature stoppage, and I'm like, what do you have to be to get the fight stopped? She was eating the canvas.
Oh, there's freeze frames of her, with her eyes almost rolled into the back of her head on the ground, and we had to watch it back. We learned later in the fight the whole "don't cry" thing with Ronda Rousey. Yeah. That's just the storybook ending for this whole thing. Correia kept coming at her in the whole build-up. Whether she said certain things on purpose or not, just to get a rise out of Ronda. And then the weigh-in, and she was barking in her face. And then as soon as she hits the canvas, Rousey just says, "Don't cry," and walks away. I mean, it's something out of a movie. That was her Rocky IV moment. Like, she wanted it to be. That was her moment, and it just kind of, I think it accelerates her stardom to even bigger heights, which I don't know if that was even possible.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be possible, but just the way that ended, the fact that Correa was barking the whole time, weigh-ins and everything else leading up to the fight, and then to have that ending with that, I guess, finality with her laying her out cold. Nobody had to double think. Is this should I stop this fight? Should I do anything else? There was no second thought. It was over, and she put a exclamation point on the end of that fight.
Yeah, I mean, that makes it 3 the title defenses in a row for Rousey that didn't last a minute. I mean, this one didn't fit on Instagram, but I mean, there were easy, 30-second clips. That's a trailer for a fight. That isn't a fight. I mean, have we gotten to the point where Rousey is too dominant for her division at 135?
But I mean, I would say yes, because in that division right now, you're going to get Rousey Tate 3.
Yeah, that's the fight that the UFC has said that they're going to do next. And she said in her interview, I believe with Ariel Helwani on Fox Sports 1 after the fight, she said, it's good for me and it's good for Misha because, we both end up making money off of me beating Misha. So, it's one of those things like Tate's taken her the farthest, right?
Yes.
And this is the point where it's the third fight basically because there's nobody else in that division that can really take a shot at Rousey, and we didn't know what Jessica I was, and she got owned by Tate in an ugly fight in Chicago. Holly Holm, has that boxer's background, but she's too green in the octagon to even think about putting her up against Rousey. So Tate is the person next, but do we have any reason to think that we're not going to get the same kind of finish here and that Rousey's going to be in trouble against what we call her biggest rival because she took the title from Tate in Strikeforce, but in actuality that she's, beaten clearly the last 2 times?
Yeah, I have not seen anything in any of Tate's last fights. She looked a little better against in her last fight, but nothing that tells me that she can take Ronda Rousey. Watching what Rousey just did to her last 3 opponents, and that Tate's going to step in and make me believe that she has a chance in this fight. Am I going to purchase the fight because of Rousey? Most definitely, but it's just to watch how long it takes for the actual final to come.
And it's funny you mentioned that, but I want to take a quick second to remind everybody that you're listening to TFM Live. This is the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com. This is something new that we started up. People know that we write for the site, but this is a podcast. Bear with us as we try to feel like, we're going to create segments. We're going to try to figure out what goes with. But now we just kind of want it to be, like a bar chat, just talking about the fights, and we'll figure ourselves out for this. So bear with us for a moment. But I want to talk about what you just mentioned. You're going to buy the next Ronda Rousey fight. You said no matter what, you're going to she's worth that money, despite the fact that she's owned her opponents. The result has never been in doubt. Do you think we will ever reach a point where people will tune out because Rousey is automatic?
If she was taking them 3 to 5 rounds and getting decisions, I would say yes. But the fact that you don't know if she's going to do a submission, a knockout, she's got so many different things into her game. I think that's what makes it different for me as far as purchasing that event, is just to see what she's going to do to end her opponent. There's nothing that, look, when you buy a Mayweather fight, you know what you're getting. He's a counter boxer and things like that. With her, she's a machine. She's going after everybody, and for that alone, I think that's what makes me want to look at it and say, okay, it's worth the money.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Mayweather thing because he set up his next fight in September against Andre Berto, and I don't know if anybody's going to really want to buy that fight because Berto, is not an opponent that can beat Mayweather. I mean, just to get on boxing for a second.
Well, it depends if you ask Showtime, because they're saying that he is a legitimate threat.
Yes, legitimate threat. Just like I'm a legitimate threat to beat Floyd Mayweather.
Exactly.
But the thing is, when you look at this, it's kind of almost, I mean, people more likely probably in boxing nowadays to watch Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. The guy's a knockout fiend, and people will watch him over Mayweather because he knocks people out. People watched Mike Tyson because he destroyed people. Tyson fights lasted a round or two before he knocked people out. And it's the same kind of deal with Ronda Rousey. You want to see how she's going to win her next fight. You want to see is she going to knock her out? Is she going to break her arm? And, I mean, Coyle did a great job. I mean, I have to admit, they sold that fight to me, regardless of whether Coyle was a legitimate contender to Ronda Rousey. That fight sold itself based on the intensity and the hate between the two competitors. And, I mean, Tate and Rousey, you got that whole storyline. That thing will sell itself. And it will be interesting to see where they exactly put that card next. Because, I mean, people were complaining about some of the rest of the card at 190. I think it was just more the length rather than the actual fights itself. Yeah. But Rousey's an easy 1 million pay-per-view buys at this point, right?
Oh, I would think so, yes. I mean, and again, this is what's funny. I was traveling for the fight and didn't think I would get to watch any of it. Coming back, I'm like, okay, it's I'm checking my timeline. I'm driving by, and I'm like, wait, these places are still packed, like Ale House and things like that. I go in, they're still like standing room only.
Wow.
And it's 1 o'clock in the morning. And I look up, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, the fight's not even started yet. So I got to watch the 34 seconds of the main event there, but people were still there. I mean, yeah, a lot of people complained about the length of the card, but again, it's one of those things where I think just like I saw on my Twitter feed, they're complaining about, oh great, we purchased a fight and it only lasted 34 seconds. Well, again, I think if you understand and you know Ronda Rousey, just like we knew what Mike Tyson was, you mentioned him before, you weren't buying them because you wanted to watch the sweet science of boxing. You were watching to see how he was going to dismantle his opponent, and now you're doing the same thing with Ronda Rousey.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and regardless of whether they put Rousey on the next card, which we'll get into a little bit later on in the podcast, I mean, she's a bigger draw than Mayweather at this point because, I mean, regardless of Rousey, if she has a good opponent or not, people are going to want to watch her because she's a likable person. She's a role model for people to look up to. I mean, she's transcended women's sports, and that's not hyperbole. It's the truth. And at this kind of point, Tate isn't that big of a fight for her, and we keep traveling back to the question. I don't think we'll get this fight in the next. I mean, I think the next one is Tate, and it could be somebody else after. But does she even need the Cyborg fight, or does Cyborg need to fight Rousey more at this point?
I mean, at this point, I would say Cyborg needs it more just because of Rousey's, popularity and even off of, just the mainstream popularity that she has right now. I mean, when you say Ronda Rousey, everybody knows who you're talking about. It's kind of like she's become, as we said before, like the Mike Tyson for boxing. You knew.
It's an event when she fights, period.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's, it doesn't matter who her opponent's going to be, and I think that's where the difference with Mayweather is right now. Is Mayweather has to fight that Pacquiao or something to draw. It's not. I don't think the Berto is going to draw like what they think he's going to draw, because I think everybody's tired of the let's go the distance, let's get a decision, and everything else. So, but Rousey goes out to finish, and that's what people want to see. No matter how many people said, I'll never order another UFC fight, I guarantee you the next Rousey fight, they're ordering it.
Yeah, and it's weird because boxing, after the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight that under-delivered in, every category imaginable, the UFC has found this. I don't know if this happened to time out perfectly with UFC 189 and the fight night in Chicago. I mean, and then Rousey in UFC 190. the one of the most successful times in the UFC's history. And regardless of all the bad press when it comes to the Reebok stuff, which they clearly do have to fix, and then other things of that nature with the Anderson Silva suspension. I mean, the Diaz brothers and Khabib going at each other in a World Series of Fighting event. This is still the UFC. I think in my mind, people talk about Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor and the UFC more right now than they're talking about Floyd Mayweather, and they've ascended to the top of the rank in combat sports at this point. Don't you think?
Most definitely. I mean, look, what Mayweather actually had to announce his fight, I think, on Twitter. That's where he kind of announced that he was.
Instagram. It's weird.
Yeah, he does, but nobody's talking about that today, really. I mean, if you look at everything else, they're not really talking about that. And in retrospect, you're looking at Rousey, Saturday night or Sunday morning, however you want to look at it, 1 in 34 seconds, and people are still talking about that.
Yeah.
They're talking about it, a million times longer than the fight actually lasted. And and he comes out and says, hey, here's my next fight. Everybody just said, okay, you picked the easy guy. And it's done. And then now, look, ESPN's picked up on it. I mean, UFC has got a momentum train building right now. And honestly, I thought some of that was going to get knocked off by the length of that card, but the main event really came through in the semi-main event and kind of picked up that momentum back up for them.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the Mayweather fight originally was supposed to be like on a network television. There was rumors of it being on CBS or something like that. And that would have drew ratings, just given the fact that you don't have to pay for it.
Yes.
But Rousey even helped out the ratings when it came to the prelims, in the pre-show, and the post-show. I think Fox Sports 1, I know the post-show, I believe, just according to MMAfighting.com, did the best ever. The post-show.
And that's the post-show.
Yeah, and
that was what that's at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? About 2 o'clock in the morning they were going on.
Yeah, and then, the draw, Damian Maia and Neil Magny, where Maia just completely dominated him. That was a decent prelim fight, but, no one's going to buy, no one's going to, not the casual fans going to be pulled in by that, but Rousey's magnetism and just the fact of who she is, people tuned in for the prelims and then watched the whole card. Like, if you're watching it with a bunch of friends, like playing poker or whatever, people are going to pay attention. And they're just going to be drawn to it, buy the fight, have it on in the background, and when the co-main event comes on and the main event comes on, people are just tuned in. And I just think this Cyborg fight would be detrimental to Rousey. If you're her, why do you take the Cyborg fight, at least right now? Because you're on top of the world, and you already got Tate lined up as an opponent, and the UFC can do some real things with that fight, possibly creating a supercard.
Yeah, and I wrote a little bit about it at the fullmountmma.com because I had the thing about the Cyborg that happened today, but how much would that help that supercard if it was actually Rousey versus Cyborg with McGregor versus Aldo?
Yeah, it is a better fight, and I think it does draw more, but
I agree with you also on that, is that Rousey doesn't need Cyborg. She has more to lose in that fight than to gain.
I definitely agree with you. Now, that fight hopefully happens eventually. Cyborg was on ESPN today talking, it was you wrote about it on the fullmountmma.com, which you can see it on Twitter as well at the Full Mount. But it was weird. It's like she was trying to intimidate her to come up to 145, even though she had come out 2 days before and said, I'll make the cut to 135 eventually. I'll fight, and then I'll win I'll try to win the title at 135 and Invicta, and then come down to UFC. It's just been this back and forth, and nothing's come of it, unfortunately, because you can create something, big with that kind of fight.
I think she's seeing the dollar signs right now. I think that's what Cyborg's looking at right now. This is a payday for her. If they can make it happen, this would be a payday, and especially if you can get on that card and make that super card and that happen. It'd be interesting to see the actual buys on that on pay-per-view and everything else, and then to see the payouts afterwards.
Yeah, because both, I mean, the UFC has said that UFC 190 is tracking better than the McGregor-Mendez of UFC 189. And people assumed, I mean, the numbers haven't come out, but there's been talk. It's like 800,000 to a million, or like 1.1, like it's a high. But there's one card that I wrote about yesterday that we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about this, that the UFC could create in December that I think could do 2 million buys, and I think this could really send the UFC skyrocketing into the big four, the big five, if you will, consciousness when it comes to sports. And we'll talk about that when we come back on the second edition of TFM Live, the official podcast of the Full Mount MMA.com.
For all the latest news and rumors of the UFC, go to the fullmountmma.com. Follow us on Twitter at the Full Mount. Now back to the TFM Live podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the FullMountMMA.com's official podcast, TFM Live. I'm Brian Coyle. Once again, Sean Stanley by my side, figuratively, not literally, because you're in Florida and I'm in New Jersey. But we're talking about the possibility right now, which we just talked about Ronda Rousey and her dominance and the kind of drawing power that she has. What could possibly be the biggest card in the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship? And that would be, the date's been lined up. I mean, this is through talk from Dana White and people at the UFC, and there's been reports floating around that the December 5th date, which could have been New York, if you're listening, anybody in the New York State Senate and Assembly, could have been Madison Square Garden, but you screwed the pooch on that and instead focused on National Chicken Wing Day, or whatever the hell you guys were doing.
Priorities, I tell you, priorities.
It's amazing, the corruption and the absolute stupidity of all the money that they could make at the world's most famous arena. But I digress, because that's close to my heart, because I can't see a fight in the Barclays machine. But I digress. Putting the UFC has found a bigger, and some would say, and I could agree with this, better replacement for Madison Square Garden for the possible December 5th card. And that would be AT&T Stadium, Cowboy Stadium, as it's like to be known, in Arlington, Texas, Jerry's World, where you could hold possibly the biggest fight, attendance-wise, money-wise, pay-per-view buy-wise, in the history of the promotion. Because there have been rumors going around, and I think it may have been talked about, that Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo will have their unification for the UFC featherweight title in Dallas as the main event at Cowboy Stadium. Finally getting the fight that we were promised in the summer. But Sean, there's been something new came out of that Saturday night, I guess you could say Sunday morning, when Ronda Rousey said, I would love to fight on that card. And Dana White kind of mentioned it, saying, oh, yeah, that would be a great card. Putting Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey, the two biggest stars in the UFC, is that a smart idea by the promotion, or is it a dumb idea?
I mean, if you're going to do it in AT&T Stadium, you're going to have to do something big. So in that aspect, I think it's a smart deal. With the drawing power of both of them, you can probably get AT&T Stadium, filled up. I just don't know what the cards leading up to that will look like with both of them. With that card so stacked, are they going to have any fight nights, the pay-per-views? Everything like that leading up, is that going to hurt some of that momentum leading into your UFC 194 in AT&T Stadium?
Yes, and if they're going to gamble big, I mean, you might as well do big in Texas, number one.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
The attendance record is 55,724 at UFC 129 in Toronto for GSP Jake Shields. And UFC 100 with 2 title fight and the Brock Lesnar Frank Mir fight has the record at 1.6 million pay-per-view buys. And you make a great point. Like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. September they have Mighty Mouse. October they have DC in the light heavyweight. November, I don't think it's been announced yet. We've gotten some fight nights like the Belfort Henderson fight.
Yep.
But I think, and I wrote about this, you can check it out on the FullMountMMA.com. I think it's a brilliant idea because you take your 2 biggest draws, and I know it's kind of putting everything together, but if they believe that they have this deep of a roster, which at this point they might have, throw the biggest cards you can at the end of the year and throw yourself into like the big time. And I think they could do it as long as everyone stays healthy. That's the only that's the risk here.
Yeah. No,
because Aldo broke his ribs.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the biggest fight in UFC history at 189, and luckily they were able to get Mendez to fight in his place. But I think if you put a third fight on there, that's pretty big. Like I mentioned in my piece, I mean, if you somehow sign Fedor, you could put him on that card and really just, overstack it. Or if you do sign him, he can headline the November card or the January card, and that's how you kind of make up for the fact that you're throwing Rousey and McGregor on the same thing. And then you put like a fight of the night, like an all-out war a la McDonald and Lawler. You put Jacare Souza and Yoel Romero against each other, or Johnny Hendricks and Tyron Woodley. I mean, it sounds like a UFC 200 card. But I think if you're going to go that route, you want to beat everything. You want to beat the attendance record. You want to beat boxing's attendance records, definitely, for the 2 Pacquiao fights that have been held in Jerry's World.
Yes.
And I think it's a risk worth taking. At this point in time, you are hot. You are really hot right now. And, I mean, people complain about the drawing power of Mighty Mouse because he dominates everybody. But, I mean, if you watch John Dodson's appearances on Fox Sports Live and Fox Sports 1, I think he's doing the Correa treatment to Mighty Mouse because he's throwing him under the bus every chance he gets.
They're talking pay-per-view buys right now, talking about the pay-per-view buys.
Yeah, and it's got a little hint of professional wrestling to it, the way they're hyping this stuff up.
Yep.
I mean,
it's kind of what Chael Sonnen, when you looked at what he did, that's the aspect that he kind of brought, and it's what you need, though, because you have to have that aspect to where, because not everybody, your casual MMA fan is not going to purchase it by, they're going to look at it and be like, okay, she's beat her twice. Why am I going to buy this? So you got to have that little aspect of, okay, all right, you kind of got to talk them into the seats is basically what it's called in wrestling terms, put in a pro wrestling terminology. You talk everybody into the seats. Paul Heyman actually, started that, and he's kind of tutored some people on that, including Chael Sonnen, but I agree with you with the fight. I mean, if you're going to take this fight at UFC 194 and make it, you got to take that big step to get to the next level. And I mean, you saw it happen. I mean, look what happened at going way back at WrestleMania for pro wrestling. That kind of changed the way everybody looked at pro wrestling. It was no longer a territorial thing. It was no longer. UFC's already past that. But now, if you can make this supercard work at UFC 194, I mean, what's to stop that momentum train after that?
Yeah, and I mean, we draw these parallels to professional wrestling and boxing so equally because, I mean, it just kind of, UFC combines everything into one, and it's great. I mean, I love the fact that, I mean, when, like, the UFC, like, in its infancy, was all over the place. But now they've found the right way to do things, at least in their eyes, to combine the best of everything that combat sports fan is looking for. And boxing had a shot to regain its dominance in the media once again from Pacquiao Mayweather. It completely bombed.
Yes.
And people would be talking about Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez and guys like that. But no one is talking about them. Instead, we've got Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor delivered at UFC 189 I mean, no offense to Chad Mendez, but there was an obvious rooting interest in that fight by certain people inside the promotion.
By many people inside the
promotion. Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to say, like, the Fertittas or Dana White, was wearing an Irish soccer jersey underneath their suits or anything like that. But again, Dana White came out in an Irish soccer jersey for the Irish promotion tour for Aldo McGregor. They want to create these personalities that they approve of, number one, because there are guys that have come out and been jerks, and they're still big promotion guys. I mean, Ben Askren being one of them, who does not fight in the UFC, and that's a travesty because, he's not an approved commodity, it seems like. But this is a thing where I just feel if you land UFC 194 in Dallas and you put Rousey and McGregor on the same card, and let's say both of them win. I mean, even if McGregor loses to Aldo, that's got the rematch written all over it. Still, from either side, this is a spot where the UFC, like you said, can take off and run with it. And I'm not saying you're competing with the NFL here, or even the NBA in that aspect, but there is a fight right now with Major League Baseball's. Is kind of holding steady now with the young superstars they got, like Mike Trout and everything of that nature. But soccer is still kind of, as the Men in Blazers of NBC Sports Network, fantastic guys. Soccer's been America's sport of the future since 1980. Like it's still not there yet. Yeah. Hockey is a niche sport.
Yeah.
It's
depends
awesome.
where you're at. Yeah, it depends where you're at, what part of the country.
Yeah, it's playoff hockey is one of the best things to watch. But, depending on what part of the country you're at, that's not a thing. But the UFC can take all those older boxing fans, take them in, and then all of the newer fans. I'm only 21 years old. I didn't get to see the highlight of, the heyday of the 90s boxing. I wasn't alive to, see it. And now the UFC's come up, and this is my generation are flocking to it. People love McGregor. I talk to my friends who have no idea anything about the UFC. They know who Conor McGregor is. They know who Ronda Rousey is, and they want to watch the fight. If I say, yeah, I'm ordering the fight, they're like, oh, yeah, we'll come over and hang out and watch the fight. This is a crucial time for the UFC to hit the ground running, and I think this is the way to do it. I think a big card has to be done. And if you were doing it in New York, Weidman would have to be on that card against Luke Rockhold. But you play to the audiences that you have and go from there. And I think this is the way to do it, bar none. You got to go big or go home.
No, definitely. Everything's bigger in Texas, right? That's what they say. But
yeah,
when you look at the UFC 194 card, and as you were saying, like in the 80s, I think what drew me, into the boxing realm was that everybody was looking to finish the fight. It wasn't about surviving and getting to that 12th round and getting a decision. Everybody was out there to end the fight, and you saw that every time somebody went out there, whether you like the guy or not, everybody was looking to try to win that fight. And I think that's what you're getting right now in the UFC. You're seeing that, look, even if somebody doesn't have a chance, that one punch could seal the deal if they can land it. And I think that's what's drawing people to the UFC right now, and it's working because the top stars are living up to their billing. Conor McGregor, his performance, and then Ronda Rousey, her performance. And you start looking at, even the fight night. You had Frank Mir, he stepped up and did his thing. So when you're looking at these fighters, those main fighters are stepping up, and UFC can take advantage of it. One thing that I do have a question for you, and it's probably looking maybe farther ahead into it, is if this is UFC 194 in Texas, what will they have to do for UFC 200?
I think it's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah, well, I guess if you look at it that way, it is. But, how much bigger can you get? What could you do at UFC 200 that would probably outdraw 194 unless it has to do with rematches, I guess?
I mean, if Rousey somehow loses, that fight's on that card. That bar none.
Yeah.
McGregor beats Aldo. There's your rematch, easy. If John Jones ever figures out his personal life, there's your third guy. I mean, Fedor, if he signs with the UFC, wins his first fight for Doom and Fedor. I mean, these are good matchups to have and good problems to have. And the great thing about having these stars, Conor McGregor and Chad Mendes was the main event of UFC 189. Everybody loved it. I mean, McGregor, huge superstar. The best fight of the night, and possibly one of the best fights in UFC history, was Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald.
Yes.
And those names are known bigger because people watched that card. For McGregor, you watch these two guys go at it. I mean, Jeremy Stevens, Dennis Bermudez had a great fight there. And those guys get, every fight on that card, those guys' profiles were immediately raised because more eyes were watching because McGregor was going to fight. And regardless if people are tuning in later, you're still going to get that rub. You're getting the rub, essentially, off of that superstardom. And you're creating bigger stars off of that.
No, 100%. And I think that's what some of these fighters now are looking at is saying, okay, what card, where am I at on the undercard of this fight, and who's fighting on top? Because, I mean, I get, if I'm a fighter, I want to be on a McGregor card or a Rousey card right now because all eyes are going to be on that card. And and that's your chance to, but then you also have to step up, and that's the other thing is these guys are stepping up when they're on those cards. I mean, I don't think there's been a fight where you look at it and you're like, they didn't give it their all. They're all going out there, and you can see that they're understanding the importance right now of where it seems the UFC is at. I mean, I don't know if they're sending out emails and being like, hey, listen, guys, we need everybody at their best and all this and everything else, but everybody at every opportunity right now seems to be stepping up to the plate, and it's giving the product to even the casual, like I say, the ale house. The reason we went to ale house because we went to somewhere else and it was even worse. I mean, this is 1 o'clock in the morning and the places are packed, and it's just, and you can't tell me all these people or MMA fans to the T, because there was other fights and they weren't that crowded. And now here it is, the Ronda Rousey fight, 1 o'clock in the morning, people are still standing there ready to go.
And people are more likely to stay in their homes and have people over to buy this fight than go out to the bars sometimes, because the bars charge so much because it's a Rousey fight or a McGregor fight. And then you're adding more pay-per-view buys by people saying, oh, let's make this an event at my house. Let's throw a party because Ronda Rousey's fighting or something along those lines. And they're still making more and more money. It's the perfect storm. And like you mentioned, guys are delivering on cards, even the fight night cards. I mean, you want to talk about Barbosa and Paul Felder.
Yeah.
That was a fight that people didn't really know that much about either guy. I mean, unless you follow the UFC intensely, you don't know that Barbosa's got legs of steel and fly everywhere. But people, I watched it with a couple of friends of mine that were complete novices, and they're looking at this guy like, how is he kicking that fast? Like, it's just it creates more buzz, and people are delivering. We have to give credit to, the UFC matchmakers. You got to give credit to Joe Silva here. They're putting together some great matchups.
Yeah, and a couple I thought would be, not so good, and have turned out far better than I would think, just when they put some together. But, I mean, right now it just seems like they can't do any wrong right now. It really does. I mean, outside, I guess, if you look at some of the things outside the cage, like you talked earlier, the Diaz brothers incident,
the HBO special with the domestic violence,
the lawsuit with Wanderlei Silva. I mean, you look at some of the things, and then the
Reebok deal, and
the Reebok deal, yeah, and then also the little Twitter drama that was on for a little bit. I don't even know if that's still going. I think it's finally died down with Dana when he talked about pro wrestling, and everybody got into an uproar about that. Just little things. But, I mean, in a way, I guess, is it bad because your name's still – I used to remember saying – I can't remember who said it, but they're like There's no things such as bad publicity, because any publicity is still, your name's still in the your name's in the papers, and you're still there no matter what. And it just seems that they can't do any wrong right now.
Mm-hmm. You know what the biggest problem the UFC has? 194, if they put McGregor and Rousey in the same card. I mean, it's who goes on last.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah, and I would go for McGregor Aldo.
I mean, that the only reason why I'd say it's McGregor Aldo is because you built it as the biggest fight.
Yeah.
But if you put McGregor Aldo, and then if the only, like I wrote in my piece in the FullMountMMA.com, Ronda Rousey, the only reason why she would go on second to last is because Misha Tate. That's the only reason. Cyborg, you got a good argument for who main events that card.
I wouldn't want to be Dana White or any of them that have to make the decision to tell the other one that they're going to be the semi-main event.
Rousey kind of seems like in her interviews that she wouldn't mind going on second, because she said she wants to be on that card, and it's not like she wants to be on her own card alongside those guys. So I mean, and that's the kind of superstar you want to have. But I just feel like, I mean, we may be seeing very positive things about the UFC right now, but they've earned it. They really have, the way they've kind of structured themselves. And we'll see in September, I mean, how Mighty Mouse and Dodson do numbers-wise and buzz-wise. Because Anthony Rumble Johnson's fighting on that card, too.
Yep.
So we'll see if they do they fall into a lull with college football. I mean, regardless of how strong your cards were or not. But I think it kind of, if you can, you don't have to carry this, because, I mean, this is going to be really hard to carry going through. But as long as you can if you don't let it drop off to a certain point, and you keep yourselves in focus, and if Fox promotes them the way they do their deal, and if ESPN continues to focus on this stuff, and you get the mainstream media to publish the way, to keep publishing the way they are about these fights, because they can't ignore it. I mean, I think there's nowhere but up with this kind of regime that the UFC's got going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think some of the numbers may drop a little bit, because you do have the college football starting back up, and you have all this other stuff right now. Which right now we're in the kind of the sports downtime, I guess you could say. We're about to pick it back up now. But again, I mean, when you have the star power that they've had on these other cards compared to what you have coming up, I think UFC has to have a realistic goal looking at it and say, okay, like as you just said, we can drop off a little bit, but we still need to be in this range to know that, okay, we're still a player in this game, and it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to be going forward.
Yeah, and I think the best way they can kind of maintain this momentum, and I think we're running out of time, but we got a couple things to talk about before we wrap up here. They can use this kind of time in November. They're putting Henderson and Belfort together. You can use these kind of old school rematches, old school fights. We watched Shogun and Rogerio Nogueira, who, I mean, I personally thought Nogueira won that fight, but it was really close to me. But people were excited for that rematch. Like, they wanted to see. Came right after Quentin Rampage Jackson says he wants a rematch. Shogun accepts. Can the UFC kind of utilize these old Pride rematches and the older UFC rematches to carry the product along up until you get to a bigger card like that? And do you think that's a good thing for the sport? Like, if we get a Shogun Rampage, if Rampage figures out all his legal stuff, is that a good thing for the sport, or is that taking away the young and rising stars, like the airtime from those kinds of guys?
Well, I think you use it. You can have one of those matches on each card. I think you got to position it as a matchmaker, and get some of those. The older, the Pride fights, and get those on there. I don't think it's going to diminish anything. I mean, as long as you have, and I wouldn't say not in their prime, but they still got to be in fighting condition. You can't just throw like back in the the beginning of UFC. You had guys that just came in there looking out of shape and just trying to live on a name. And as long as they're still taking this serious, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think you're going to get some of your older fans and some of your newer fans, but then also you look at it and you say, okay, this guy we want to start making a name for. I mean, I think they do that still to this day, like with Duffy and Mir. I think they're trying to get Duffy, a name and have him, take out a name opponent, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And Mir actually now has elevated his game. So, and you start looking like we talked about I think it was last time, is you start looking at some of these heavyweights that are coming back. I mean, that's the one division where it doesn't seem like age doesn't matter.
No, I mean, age is just a number for the UFC heavyweights right now. And I agree with you, because you can use that kind of fight. You put that if that's like the second main the co-main event, to elevate these younger stars, like you mentioned before. And then even if it does backfire, so to speak, and then the veteran beats the young kid, that puts the veteran back into contention here. Because if you got this, I mean, look at Maya and Magny from the prelims the other night. I mean, Magny had ripped off 8 straight wins, and Maya was a name that everybody knows. He took care of him easily, and now he's in that loaded welterweight division where it just seems like, everybody, he's winning fights. And you put him against a guy like they were talking about Gunnar Nelson. That's a young kid. A young name who's got associations to Conor McGregor that we saw on that card, and you can kind of build him up. And if he beats Maya, great. If Maya beats him, we're throwing Maya back into the mix again. It's something that you can't go wrong with, I think.
No, I agree 100%. And I kind of today, Diego Sanchez, he's going to try to make a run now at his 4th weight division in featherweight. Yeah. In the featherweight division, he's going to be taking on Lamas. So, it's going to be interesting because you got these guys coming back, and I think everybody right now is trying to jump on that UFC momentum train, and you're going to get these guys that are going to, maybe some of these guys that didn't take it so serious before because they thought, I don't have any issue. I'm going to be on the next card. I already know. They're seeing all these young guns come along, and now I think training camps are getting a little bit, realer, and you can see it, and the product is showing that, and also the injuries. That is one thing that could derail a little of this momentum train if they start getting these injuries at training camp and things like that. So it's going to be an interesting juggle that the UFC has to do, because it's not like they can say, you can't pull, I guess, like the NFL training camp and be like, you can only do 3 days of contact and this and that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do this, because you can't take the risk of your draw getting hurt, 2-3 a month out from the fight, and now you have to throw a replacement in.
And they just figured out. I think it's going to make fighters, train year round, because Mendez was on like when you see Aldo go out and Mendez comes in. I think DJ Dillashaw said he was hanging out, drinking beer, but he keeps in shape.
Yep.
And if somebody realizes if Aldo went out, why can't this guy go out? If that does happen, I should be ready, and I should call the UFC as soon as I hear about it, and elevate my game from there. I think it's an interesting time in the UFC. I really think that it's a good time, even though they do have these hiccups, especially with the Reebok deal. But the drug testing, that IV thing is going to be interesting to talk about. If fighters abide by that, not rehydrating via IVs. I don't know if there's a way to test for that or not. Aldo came out and said he's going to do it anyway. But with stricter drug testing, it's made people like Ronda Rousey happy. It's reportedly made George St. Pierre happy. And if GSP could come back, and Anderson Silva gets cleared, you're bringing these returning, and you sign Fedor. This is a kind of UFC that can jump into the limelight. And I think it will be very, very intriguing from here on out to see how they carry themselves from here.
Yeah, and what's funny is, like, you kind of just said it, and kind of avoided it earlier, but they're doing this without who I think they thought were going to be their big names right now, the GSPs, your Anderson Silvas, names that I think they thought were going to be at the forefront are now, coming back. But they've done all this without them. So what is beyond the horizon with them as part of the UFC?
Yeah, we were talking, how many years ago were we talking that Anderson Silva and GSP would be the greatest super fight of all time?
Yeah.
And then now we're talking about, other super fights when John Jones and Chris Weidman could have fought. Mm-hmm. Or we're talking about Daniel Cormier and Weidman, or DJ Dillashaw and Conor McGregor. And these are fun fights.
We're even talking Rousey Cyborg. How many years ago do you think we'd be talking, two women fighting as a super fight?
Yeah. Cyborg's, the last time she was in the news was she beat Gina Carano all the way to Hollywood. So this is like the kind of thing where these fighters from what the UFC used to call their heyday are coming back into the fold, into this new era of the UFC, and I think it's going to be a melding of both generations, and I think it's going to work gangbusters for them. I really do.
Yeah, I don't see anything stopping them. They're getting. There was old, young. When I walked in this place, and I was just like, they've got almost every demographic nailed. Yeah. I don't think there's a demographic that's not watching UFC right now, and as you said, I think it's a great problem when you're trying to figure out who's going to be the main event and who's going to be the semi-main event. When you have issues like that, you're doing something right.
Yeah, those are good problems to have. And quick, before we get out of here, I wanted to get your thoughts on the upcoming UFC Fight Night this Saturday in Nashville. Not a huge card, but it's a fight night. So, I recommend, there are going to be some great fights. So, if you're just sitting around on the Saturday night, I definitely recommend it. I want to get your thoughts. Michael the Menace Johnson against Beneil Dariush. Is there any chance that Michael Johnson loses here?
I very slim to none, I'll say.
Yeah, I think he's gonna clear him easily, and I think that kind of sets up. Michael Johnson wins. I'm intrigued about a fight with him and Benson Henderson. I'm just throwing it out there. It's been kind of talked about. That's the kind of matchup I'd be very interested in seeing. And then the main event, Glover Teixeira and Ovin St. Preux. St. Preux's kind of rose the ranks pretty quickly here.
Yeah. And
I think Teixeira is a great test. What do you think is going to happen here?
It's going to be interesting, but I'm going with St. Preux on that one.
Yeah, I think, this is the kind of fight where I think it can go either way, but the Rising Star, I think this is a good test to see if St. Preux can live up to the hype surrounding him, and beating the number 4 ranked light heavyweight be a great start to do it.
Yeah, with these fight night cards too, it's like you're getting a glimpse at, some of these guys are getting chances to headline cards that normally wouldn't have been able to headline. I think it's a great thing to see if some of these guys can handle that, the spotlight. Because some guys, they're great fighters when they're undercard, but when the pressure gets on them to be, this is your card to, you're the main guy on this card. Sometimes they don't live up to that pressure, so it's going to be interesting to see if that takes a toll on this one. Yeah,
and you've got Sarah McMahon fighting, you've got Uriah Hall fighting, so I think it's going to be a fun card to watch. Anything else you wanted to get to before we get out of here, Sean?
No, that's pretty much it. Just tuning that card. I think it's going to be a very solid card. I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to take away from the momentum that's going right now in UFC, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be fun. Before we get out of here, we'll remind everybody, this is TFM Live. This is the official podcast of the FullMountMMA.com. You can find me on Twitter if you want to, follow me on Twitter for any of the fight information, or I also tweet about plenty of NFL stuff if you're interested in that regard, at BCoyle11. Sean, tell the people where they can follow you, because I know you get multiple Twitter accounts going. I follow you in more than one way, I think, at this point.
Yeah, what happened was I got at SS Sports Talk. That's when I talk mostly sports and MMA, and also for my show that I have also. So that's the one you can hit me up on most of the time.
But if you don't want to follow either of us, I mean, that's okay.
There's definitely one you should follow, though.
The one account you have to follow is at the Full Mount.
That's
where you're going to get all of your MMA, UFC information. I mean, to a T. We're putting up stuff every day on the fullmountmma.com, so you can follow us on Twitter at the Full Mount. Nice and easy. You don't have to put in a bunch of underscores and spaces and then stars. I mean, it's just all one word, nice and easy, at the Full Mount, and at the fullmountmma.com. So, Sean, I want to thank you for joining me on the second edition. I think this went as smooth as the first edition went, maybe a little bit better. So I think we're going to work our way into these, I think. I like it.
Oh, I enjoy them very, very much. And to piggyback on what you just said there, at the Full Mount, you can also catch some live tweeting on most of these cards.
Oh yeah,
for the UFC cards.
Whoever's running the Full Mount Twitter account, it could be a variety of people, but they also retweet us, and I apologize for that in advance if you don't want to follow me. You know what I mean? I say some things during the fights,
I think you're a great follow myself. I think you're a great follow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But again, thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back next week on TFM Live, the official podcast of the fullmountmma.com.